Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. I'm your host, Lucas McCann. With us today, Christie Tarantino-Dean, Chief Executive Officer at IFT, and I will say it all out because it's the world of acronyms here and associations, the Institute of Food Technologists. Did I get it right?
You did.
Excellent. Welcome to the show, Christie. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about IFT, what you've been doing there lately, and then I want to go back in time to figure out how you found this world of associations.
I have been at the Institute of Food Technologists for 12 years, next week, actually. It's been a great organization to be a part of. I really am very passionate about the mission, but that's what drove me to IFT, which I can talk about a little bit. We are a scientific society made up of individuals who work in the food sciences. So there is an undergraduate degree in food science, undergraduate, master's, and PhD programs, but it could be anyone from a food microbiologist who works in food safety to an engineer who works in packaging, to a nutritionist, food scientist. So most of our members work in some type of product development around food, but they're also involved in safety, supply chain, all kinds of the multidisciplinary approach to getting food to our tables.
You know, let's go back. How did you first enter? You've been there for a few years, but before that?
Yeah, so I think I'm one of those unique people that knew about associations going back to probably high school. I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, and one of my dad's best friends was an association executive. And so I started as a babysitter for he and his wife when they had their children. And then when I was in college, he had me work in, holidays and in the summer. So I knew about associations. I was in graduate school, getting a master's in public administration, thought I might want to go into healthcare administration, and was doing an internship with the VA medical system when yet another family friend, who was part of a men's Friday breakfast group, called me up and told me that the Alabama State Bar was looking for a membership director, and that he thought that I would be good for that, and put me in touch with the executive director of that organization at the time, and that was it. So 1993, I got my first full-time job as director of membership for the Alabama State Bar. And the rest is a long time ago, 33 years of working in associations, which is pretty crazy.
Well, we share a few things then. So one, I knew about associations as well. My grandfather was an ED on the Hill before I even knew about the Hill. Been in associations myself for a long time, and we both have New Orleans art, which Christie's currently in New Orleans, which I'm jealous of. I'll be there in a few weeks for Jazz Fest, but so the commonalities continue. What's for you? What's kept you in this in the association industry?
It's really the people. I as I mentioned, I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, and, loved where I grew up, spent a lot of time in New Orleans, which is where most of my family, extended family was located. But being in associations, and eventually moving into national and international associations, I've gotten to travel the world. I've worked for lawyers, dentists, meeting planners, now food scientists, and, just learning about other professions and fields and seeing the passion of these people that we support and the real difference that they make, I think is really what has been special for me. And to be able to have friends all over the country and even in other parts of the world as a result of working in this field. I could have never dreamed of that, growing up in a town of 200,000 people. So that's truly what has kept me passionate about it.
Yeah. I love that you've had the opportunity to do all those things. I think sort of a well-diversified leader in that regard is what makes some of the best. I'm curious to hear, having learned, I like that you said, you spent all this time learning, how has all of that learning helped you become a better leader, and how has it changed your perspective over that time?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I learned, and I should have mentioned, working for Association Forum of Chicagoland, where I had exposure to all kinds of associations. I think what I came to really appreciate when I was at Association Forum is that an association will take on the personality of their membership, and so how the leadership of a bar association or PCMA or Association Forum is very different from general dentists, how they operate versus, how maybe a physician organization or even food scientists. And so I think that really is helpful because you have to learn to be more nimble as an association leader, and understanding that profession dynamic really helps you frame up how you work with them as volunteer leaders and how you support them as well. I think is the biggest learning that I've had working for those diverse professions over 30 years.
I think that's a great point, and I think it's really difficult for somebody who's younger in their career entering this market to understand that balance. It's sort of easy to impart your own sense of, hey, I want to charge in here to a new association as a new leader, and I want to impart everything I know, and we're going to do it my way. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's well, this is for them. I just want to do whatever they do. I mean, how do you balance, and where do you draw the line? And I tee that question up as it's the grayest question of all time, because there's no right or wrong answer in the spectrum.
No. And I think, having done this for a while, I think learning that a lot of it is about picking your moments, and it isn't about you. It is about how do you build trust with the volunteer leaders, whether that is a committee chair or committee early in my career to working with boards. And now we're working with a board, a third of it, role changes every single year. You have a new president. And I think learning them, what's important to them, bringing your expertise to the table and trying to create that partnership. And that's one of the things I truly love about IFT, is because the field is so multidisciplinary. Our members really respect the expertise and experience of everyone that they're working with, and really create that partnership with our staff team is really, really wonderful. And I don't take that for granted, but I think it's learning what's important to them and the field. When I was at General Dentistry, I went and visited leaders, spent a day or two in their dental practice, and I realized how hectic their day was, and they don't have a lot of time to talk to me on the phone, and and really how their team works versus now going and to all kinds of various food, either manufacturers or academic environments, to understand what their daily life is like, so that we can better serve them and work with them in a way that makes it a meaningful experience for them as well.
Absolutely. The walk a mile in their shoes approach is very, very effective. And maybe put you on the spot a little bit. What have been, over your time, maybe we'll just keep it on IFT, what have been some of those moments where you sort of put your stamp on it or made your mark? And I know they've had some changes. How you work with the board, and there's been some change more recently with the website. Like, talk to us about how you make sort of those changes, why you made those decisions, and maybe some of the challenges too.
Yeah, sure. So I think, when I got to IFT 12 years ago, one of the things that the organization had been through a good bit of change prior to me being there. And I really spent a lot of time listening. I read, a mentor of mine had talked to me about the book, The First 90 Days. And I read that book, and I used that in my approach to really talking to so many people, seeing what the common themes were, and really looking at, how to pace that change. I think sometimes, and some of my past organizations have probably gone a little too fast and not brought people along with me. And making sure your board is with you as you make those changes. And so, there were incremental changes along the way. This is our second website in my 12 years, big website redesign. And so the pace of change, I would say since 2020 has been dramatically different than my first 5 years at IFT. And so, so during the pandemic, one of our board president at the time, we did popular elections, which, we had a very rigorous process to get board members from that point forward, but we weren't getting necessarily the most diverse board. As I said, it's a very disciplinary, multidisciplinary, membership. And we weren't able to put a puzzle together that said, yes, we have young scientists, we have, food safety, we have product development, we have all of these aspects to get international representation. And so we put a task force together during the pandemic of very, very diverse, very senior leaders in our organization. I brought in the chief science officer at PepsiCo, who reported to a corporate board, and said, does this make the best sense for us moving forward? We don't know what will happen coming out of the pandemic, and we want to make sure we have the most diverse board across every dimension we can have. And we put that together, had some member town halls, and put it to a member vote, and it passed by 90% of the voting members within 90 days. So the big learning there was that, sometimes in associations will take years to make those kinds of changes. And certainly I had very good leadership who had been a student member of IFT. Our president at the time, his father had been an IFT fellow. So it was the right leader at the right time. And he said, we need to think about this as a burning platform of a lot of change for our organization. And so that meant that now I have coming onto my board next year, a younger professional who started a venture capital fund around investing in food startups and sustainability and other things. That would have never happened prior, because she wouldn't have been well known by the membership to be elected. I have my president next year is from South Africa. I've since had a president from Australia. They wouldn't have been elected, previously because of that name recognition, but are wonderful leaders. And then we're also able to ensure we have a number of academic leaders, a number of R&D leaders with different specialties, different types and sizes of companies and institutions, in addition to the students that we have on our board. So to me, that's been a really big change. It's changed what we're talking about too, and the types of risks we might take, like launching an AI tool for product developers that we did last year. So it's changed my job dramatically in many ways, which is, it's good. We're working through that, but the website change was really to recognize that we needed to actually serve that diverse membership. It can be, translated into over 200 languages, those kinds of things, really changing and broadening our mindset about how we can serve our members into the future, not just the way we've always done it.
Well, Christie, it was a lot, but it's such a beautiful, just looking back, if I step back for a second, it's just such a beautiful example of sort of an antiquated approach to associations on this rule by committee. It takes a long time. Everything can be, 6 months to a year in process, and there's multiple committees and subcommittees, and often, not always, often ruled by sort of the old guard mentality. And the approach of changing that around to, one, keep up with the pace of business, which I recently was speaking with somebody who said the pace of business is the slowest it will ever be in history again, which already seems very fast, right? You just mentioned right now is the fastest time we've ever had in the past 5 years. Well, then to push that forward and go, this is as slow as it's ever going to get, sort of twists your mind around a little bit. So then to make those changes and to reserve seats at the table for individuals that represent groups within the association who didn't previously have representation or a little bit more forward thinking. And I also think about a conversation I had, this was probably a year ago. It was saying most of the job titles that the next generation will have don't exist yet. The title literally doesn't exist. And we have titles today in our organization that didn't exist, right? Chief People Officer wasn't around, a few decades away. Director of AI, like that's a more and more common practice. So I applaud you, and I could understand how you would be so proud of that because there's still so many associations lagging behind. So,
Well, and you also asked what was a challenge or what was learned, and I think that not long after we made that change and our board was changing, we made a big decision that really was unpopular in the organization. And I think, in hindsight, I would have probably brought that to the board a little bit differently, the challenge that we had, because, it really became a year-long issue. But I had underestimated this new board and how they would act much more quickly and decisively than the boards I had worked with previously. And so that was a big learning as well, as adjusting and adjusting how our team works with this board. These are very business minded individuals, no matter where they're coming from. And they like speed. And so now I'm regularly saying we might need to slow this down a little bit to get it right. So it's changed how, as an entire team, we have to think about things with very different mindsets on our board. So the speed is this. All my peers that I speak to, the pace is really challenging. And as you said, I think this is just the new normal.
Yeah. Part of me believes that is something that you have to direct, and it's sort of a culture that you have to build to keep up. And part of me believes that, you mentioned some of the members on the board are younger professionals. Part of me believes that younger professionals by nature have this more impatient approach to them, or they seem to think that things are more transactional because it's just that's the culture we've built in business and in life, that if we want it, we get it now, and it can happen now, and it should happen faster.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say also, when you have board members who sell they're making products that go on the shelf, if it's not selling, they pull it, and they've done a lot of research. And that's the thing that associations are terrible at, is getting rid of things that we used to do, legacy programs. And staffs, that's not just boards, that's staff, right? That put a lot of time and energy into building something. And when it doesn't sell, we just want to work harder at it. But the resources aren't unlimited. And so I think that's part of what we have to adjust to in my organization, is we have people that are, especially if they're in very senior roles in one of these big food companies, they have shareholders that have to be, have a certain return. And as an organization, they're bringing that, are we putting the best, suite of products on the table that are going to be used? And we don't, those little things that attract 30 people to a webinar are not the things that we need to focus on. And so that is a big shift for us as well, especially with the diversity of our membership. It's hard, to try to serve all people equally at times. So we're working our way through how to best do that.
You're not alone. And when you say like they're putting things literally on the shelf, I imagine the time at which they allow them to sit, because the data is so readily available, right? They can make decisions so much faster, whereas before they may have let things sit on the shelf for weeks or months and kind of let it play out and continuing to invest and hope that consumer behavior would, the lagging indicators. Now it's probably almost real time. And
there's a lot of data, and a lot of tools that are coming out. And we have to be able to use those tools too, as an association. So we're getting better at data governance and management and insights. But we've had to create new positions in our organization in order to do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the same applies for associations. Again, if you go back few decades when I started in associations, it was common practice to set a 5-year plan and do strategic planning every 5 years. I knew some that did it 7 and 8 years at the time. And now our organization, not an association, but we work with associations, we do planning every 6 months. And it's, the proverbial values and products on the shelf. If they're not working, we pull them down and we put something else new and we pivot. And we're constantly looking at that type of thing. And the same is true for associations.
Yeah, I'm not going to say we're great at it just yet, but we're working, towards that. And it's also bringing different team members on who have different experience than associations too. I think we have a nice balance. I do think it's not easy for everyone to transition to associations that may have been in corporate environments. But we've got to get better at that constant planning, constant shifting. And it's hard because I think we're all dealing with so much change in our personal lives too. And then your work life is pretty dynamic as well. I think it puts a different emphasis on how we manage and lead, to bring people along with change, because there's just been so much change in the last 5 years, 6 years now, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And the access to a more global market is more commonplace. You mentioned earlier, IFT, it's a global organization, and global nonprofit means many different things. Talk to us a little bit about what that means for IFT in current day.
Yeah. So to start, the food system is very global. If we all didn't understand that before the pandemic, I think we should understand it now. And so we have members from over 90 countries. We have a large, our annual event is a very large B2B trade show where we'll have attendees from over 100 countries. And so that is really where we are global. We have what we call our sections, which are chapters in the UK and Japan, Mexico, Canada. And then we have a student association, which I always say they lead the way, and they're becoming much more global in terms of their chapter network. And so, but what we haven't done yet is really develop specific products and services for different regions across the world. We also have a recognition program for undergraduate food science programs, where more than half of our approved undergraduate food science programs are outside of the United States now. So, so we have small pockets, but if I compare us to some of my friends who run organizations where they have offices in 6 countries and have those types of things, we're nowhere close to that. But we do have to be mindful of cultural differences, of how we can provide translation services, not have a one size fits all when we think about what we ask our sections to do, our student chapters to do. But we have, they're multinational companies that, people on my board manage teams around the world. And so we're really looking at what is that next iteration for IFT, to be able to better serve people where they are, versus being a very North American centric organization that you should just want what we give you out of the US. And how do we better help them, whether they're making product to come into the U.S., bringing ingredients into the U.S., or want to work in a U.S.-based company. How do we help and support them to solve food system challenges that is also becoming more and more complex when you have climate change, supply chain issues, global geopolitical events that do impact supply chain. So it's where we want to go, but we're on a journey to get there for sure.
progress. And I think the approach is very thoughtful and in common practice, just the smallest things of adding the international language expansion things to the website, not only to reach members, to, as you mentioned, to meet students in other countries that want to learn about what you all are doing as a global organization. So
Yeah.
I think you're headed in the right path, and progress is perfection in my mind. So.
We'll see.
One of the things I wanted to touch on, and kind of switching gears, before we jumped on, you had shared a little bit about your passion to invest in volunteer leaders and within the organization and the association industry. Talk to us a little bit about what that investment looks like and why.
Yeah, so early in my career, and I would say really, when I most came to appreciate it was when I was at the Professional Convention Management Association and worked closely with their chapter leaders and volunteer leaders, some of whom are still some of my closest friends, today, almost 30 years later. And, in seeing those individuals, how it helps their career development, and then also how it pays off for the association in the long run. And at IFT, I see it through our student association. It was one of the things that really excited me about coming here is that we do have student leaders. Most of them are graduate students, but just brilliant, passionate young leaders about what they're doing. And now on my board of 15, I think at least 3/4 of them were student leaders in our organization 25 years ago. And we will have our first father-daughter student association president next year, which really excited me. So, a leader in our organization who's been chairing our leadership development committee, his daughter was just named president-elect, selected to be president-elect of our student association. And I texted him, I said, "Congrats, Dad." And he wrote me back, he goes, "She didn't even tell me she was going for it, but I love that. I'm quite sure she'll be, a leader of IFT, 25 years or 20 years from now." And so, for us, we're investing more heavily in our section, our chapter leaders. It resonates with me. We just came off a leadership retreat for leaders from our 44 sections, and the enthusiasm, the excitement, they're still all over LinkedIn talking about it. But you can see these are people who have jobs, usually younger leaders, have, family obligations, yet they are so passionate about the organization that they're, volunteering. Many of them don't have paid staff, and our larger sections do, but they care about that. Should be inspiring to all of us that work for IFT, is that this is what they're willing to do because this organization means so much to them. So it's easy to be passionate about how do we give them the tools and skills, because it is harder. It's harder to get people to join associations today. The demands and the time that people have is so much less, or their time certainly is so much less. The demands are greater. And so how do we try to make it as easy as possible for them and give them skills they can use elsewhere in their lives as well? So, because we need our volunteers, they're our biggest champions for the organization. They help us grow, and they help us, create the content that is so valuable, and the solutions to challenges through education programming. So that's why I'm passionate about it.
Well, you're clearly doing something right over there, Christie. If 2/3 of the board now are made up of previous student leaders, and you have leaders raising leaders within the organization to be the next board chair, something in the water over there at IFT is working well. So,
well before my time, it was one of the things that I quickly found was very special about the organization, for sure.
Wonderful. Well, before I wrap us up, I want to switch gears to sort of just some fun questions I'll throw at you. The first is, what's something, Christie, that goes on your calendar, and you flip from December to January, and you're in that period, you're pulling out your calendar and the pen, personal or professional, what goes on there first and just holds court not to be moved?
Well, it's not one thing. So I had a past president several years ago we had a really challenging year, and I, was getting halfway through the year and hadn't had any vacation time. And she said, you should always start the year with blocking, your 3 weeks or whatever it is. And so now I try to do that. And I shared that with someone else lately and said that they keep thinking about that because we get so busy, and then you end up the year when you're burned out, you're cranky because you haven't taken that time to step away, and it's harder than ever. And so I try to get my husband to do the same, where we sit down and say, okay, let's block our weeks off. And those should not be moved or changed unless it's, I don't know, something's burning down maybe. But that's what I try to do at the beginning of the year, because it really has changed my ability to make sure I can be the best I can be and step away.
Absolutely. Block those staycations in New Orleans and enjoy the restaurants.
That's right. That's right.
So, I mean, running an association, right? It's a lot to think about, the events and marketing and staff and members and all of that. What's within all that? What's something fun? Like, what's the most fun thing about IFT?
And I'm sure people would say this is cliche, but really our annual event, the energy is just off the charts. I love interacting with our past presidents. When you get scientists keep their brains sharp for a really long time. And so we have past presidents in their 80s, and we have one who was coming in his 90s, and sitting next to him at a past president's dinner talking about, when he went to China for the first time, bringing Folgers instant coffee, to that market, and driving on, dirt only car on the roads and things like that, and people who are passionate about, the new products that they've developed. It's really fun. And watching our students have a lot of, competitions at our conference where they're designing a product for a region of the world that has food insecurity, and designing healthy snacks, and teams from all of our our universities are coming together to compete to win that. It's where you see the outcome of the work, and how it really affects everyone. We all eat. And seeing that really energizes, I know, not just myself, my whole team, to work hard through the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think inadvertently you've pointed out something that if others in the industry are looking to, maybe change associations or at the executive level, I think that's something to look for. I've never thought about that before, but if you go to an event and past presidents are coming back, they didn't just retire and fly away from the association. They really want to continue to invest and be part of it. I think that's something special, and that's a place where, you should really consider being.
Yeah, they're amazing. I mean, just truly the work and the impact that they've had on all of our lives is so impressive.
Yeah, and if they're coming back in their 80s and 90s, wow, definitely.
Yeah,
that's a position it's an association you want to be a part of for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Christie, lastly, I mentioned this question had evolved. It used to be something that, what could we couldn't find out about you on your resume or something on the internet. And I've evolved it into, what's something that the best AI doesn't know or couldn't find out about Christie?
I would say that it's that I had a horse as a kid, and was just a horse crazy teenager. And I continue to, think maybe one day I would have a horse again. So I loved it. My dad would say it taught me a lot of leadership and hard work skills, because we couldn't afford, to have someone do all the hard work with the horse. So I was going before and after school, did all of it myself because I was determined to have one. And, I think it really did set the stage for doing a little dirty work, rolling up your sleeves at times to do the things that not many people would want to do. But it is something that I really look back so fondly on as part of my childhood, and that my parents made it happen, even though they probably couldn't afford to do it, but it was a passion of mine. So I don't
Well,
think that's out there anywhere.
yeah. I'm jealous, and the quasi parallels continue. My best friend growing up lived on a horse farm, and he had his horse, and then his dad had his horse, his sister had his horse. But I would spend lots of time over there because he had a horse, and we'd play in the barn, and then we'd go ride the horse without saddle, doing knucklehead stuff as young boys do, and try to go as fast as we can. And the horse would decide it wanted to eat, and there we go, right off the front. But
we do have a lot in common.
we did.
Done that myself.
Well, before I completely wrap us up and turn off this episode, Christie, is there somebody in your network that you think our network would benefit from hearing from, our audience?
Yeah, and this is top of mind because I've been close to it. But Greg Heydrich with the Society of Actuaries is retiring May 3rd, and how he handled planning for his succession with his board. I think I've not really seen anyone else as thoughtfully do that and really set up his successor and his board to be ready for that transition. I think is something we all, as we get a little older in our careers, start to think about and talk about. I think it would be really interesting for you to hear how he went about that, and for others who aren't exposed to it to hear about it.
Well, I appreciate that referral, and that topic specifically near and dear to my heart. I've always marveled at those that do it really well and think about those behind them, and setting the association or the corporation or whatever it is really up for success. It's selfless and it's smart, and so that's a great referral, and thank you for that. And I hope Greg will join us. We'll ask him politely. And
all right, great. I'm sure he will. I'll talk him into it if he has any information.
Put your sales hat on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Christie, for the time. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Thanks for having me.